The South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry says political interference has created the Eskom crisis. It follows a proposal by the ANC that Eskom be moved from public enterprises to the Energy Department. SACCI CEO Alan Mukoki joins us now for more. Good to have you with us, and thank you very much for your time tonight on In Focus. Before we get to the remedies and which remedies to reject outright, paint for us a picture of what unpredictable energy supply has done to small businesses in the country.
Well, good evening to you and your listeners and viewers as well. I think that it's common cause that when you are in a production cycle and then your energy, which is one of the biggest inputs into that particular cycle, is interrupted, you are actually going to have a very serious problem with your own productivity. That's the first point. And then secondly, you have orders that you get from people. Some of the clients are very overseas based and they're relying on South African products and raw materials, whatever the case might be. And they themselves cannot fulfill their own production cycles wherever they are. So you begin to have a reputation problem that you are actually unable to supply, and overseas clients aren't necessarily interested in your power excuses. So you then get into that particular cycle. Productivity being low means, in other words, revenues are not going to show up, but your costs are actually staying. Those people who are looking for alternatives, it doesn't mean that the alternative isn't going to cost you more money. It will be costing you more money. There are not too many other alternatives to the energy supply that's coming from Eskom that are actually going to be cheaper from a productivity point of view.
There are some stakeholders who are pinning their hope on the National Emergency Energy Crisis Committee and the plans that were announced by the President, saying that, well, if we stick to those, yes, we know that for the next 18 months it's going to be a rough ride, but if we stick to those, things are going to get better. Do you think small businesses are going to be able to ride the curve and come out still in existence on the other side of at least the next, we don't know, 18 months, could be 24 months, it could be more than that?
Exactly, especially because we've made these kinds of promises before. So let's not forget, even the current Eskom CEO, who is outgoing now, when he arrived at Eskom, his own prediction that he announced publicly was that it would be an 18-month issue and then load shedding should end. The president has gone in on even overseas tours, whether it's WEF or any of those kinds of engagements, and to say within that we've ended load shedding. It looks like to me it's a problem that's become so intractable that it doesn't necessarily follow a pattern of confidence if you say, I'm going to sort it out in 24 months. So that has sucked the energy and the confidence of many business people in terms of whether are we ever going to resolve this issue and resolve it in a way that's sustainable and permanent. So it's a very big issue that many will not actually be able to survive because you have the costs. Either you're going to have to get rid of people, you are going to postpone any expansionary efforts, or you are going to stop your sales team from going out to sell things because, you can't be making promises that you continue to fail to deliver.
Political head exercising oversight on some aspects of our energy generation in the country, Gwede Mantashe, made a really strong statement that others are saying led to the resignation of CEO Andre Director at Eskom, that what's happening with load shedding is akin to agitating for the overthrow of state. If we put that question differently and we put it to business, do you think political leadership is sabotaging the business sector?
Well, I don't necessarily think that they would be doing so, intentionally. But I think that the lack of competence in trying to run businesses, the political interference that we as SACCI continue to raise as one of the big risks that are facing the performance and the operations at SOEs becomes an issue. I mean, we make this example all the time. People who get elected to political positions are elected not because they are good business people or they've got senior executive leadership experience or skills. They are elected because of popularity in the politics of fighting the agenda for politics that is being on the manifesto of that particular political party at the time. Now what we do, we then say, oh, but we elected you to be a political person. Many of these political people may not necessarily have had an opportunity, given the history of South Africa, to have worked either at senior board level executives or operational executives in large corporations. Now they are being given the task and the responsibility, and they give it to themselves as well, of wanting to manage a business without any skills. I mean, that's going to happen. It doesn't matter whether you're coaching a football team or you're trying to participate in any other endeavor. you will not necessarily succeed because no person can be more competent than their level of experience. So you need people who have the level of experience. And unfortunately, the level of engagement by the political party or the politicians needs to be reviewed in terms of where does it start and where does it end. Do you want to be operationally engaged? Do you want to be the person who approves the strategy, which is largely operational in respect of that particular SOE, or do you want to only have political oversight, and then you shall obviously delegate the responsibility for operational performance to those people who have that level of expertise. So we dare not fail because this is a very critical issue, but we need to define our roles very clearly in terms of what does the minister, what does the cabinet do, and let's not appoint people to roles, or let's not allow people to appoint themselves to roles where they clearly would not necessarily have that level of competence because they lack the experience, the skills, and the education and anything, and all those kinds of things.
From SACCI's point of view, if you want to put it clearly, you're saying the ANC as a political organization lacks the skills and maybe even the experience to even dare venture into appointing a CEO at Eskom.
Well, I'm not saying the ANC alone. I'm saying that any other political organization, whose mandate would have been political, try and solve the social issues, it would be unfair to expect of themselves to be able to run a corporation to determine the composition of a board. Selection and recruitment of people who are going to run a particular corporation has got to be done in a way that is very scientific. You need to be very clear in terms of your selection and your recruitment criteria. You need to be very clear in terms of how you handle executive development and leadership. You need to be very clear in terms of performance management. You're not necessarily going to show up today having come from the background that you come from and then expect to be highly competent in an environment which we refer to today as the four horsemen of VUCA have just rode into town. The environment is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's very ambiguous. So the trick is that it's become much more difficult in any event. Even if you're giving it to a seasoned business person, it would have to be someone who really has really significant competences in understanding how to do things like turnarounds. So it's not only an issue around the ANC as a political party, but any other political party that would dare to want to venture into areas that they lack a competence in.
Yeah, I want to ask you this question, but I'm being very cautious in asking you this question because it hasn't come to us via an official statement, but it has come to us via a form of a tweet from the spokesperson of the president, that the president has seemingly cancelled his trip to the World Economic Forum because of the energy crisis in the country and will be meeting the various committees and stakeholders. Do you think that is a positive thing on the part of the president to do?
Well, it is a positive thing on the part of the president to show a level of urgency. It's not just about him coming back. Obviously, we can't be having such a significant problem and the president is away. So he needs to be at home looking for solutions in terms of how the problems can actually be resolved. He alone will not be able to solve the problem. The cabinet on its own will not be able to solve this problem. And I think that sometimes we make the mistake of underestimating the level of commitment that's coming from the government itself. No one is questioning that. You can't be questioning whether the president is not concerned about the issue of load shedding. Absolutely, he has to be. He is as concerned as everyone else. But we need to then be able to say the solutions that are on the table and the people that you are resourcing the particular solution with are not necessarily adequate. We've been here before. There have been so many iterations of the president leaving whatever he was doing overseas, coming back home to try and solve the problem. So we have to be able to say those who are advising the president need to be able to whisper to the president. The things that we've done up until now are not actually working. We therefore need to question our own decision-making in that particular regard and look for a new way of doing things. And that basically ought to be the message.
Alan Mukoki, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much, sir, for coming on tonight. SACCI CEO there, Alan Mukoki, says, well, I suppose at this particular time, those with the competency, technical, scientific competence of appointing a CEO at an institution like Eskom should be left to do that, and not political parties whose mandate really is to solve social issues in the country.